Hello and welcome back. Today we will be continuing our Victoria 3 tutorial series, and we are going to be discussing something that this is probably going to be our most complicated tutorial we've ever done, or if it's not the most complicated, it's going to be at least the one with the most moving pieces. We are going to be doing a deep dive on command economy and why command economy is so bad, and specifically to that end, we've already discussed a lot of things that are bad about command economy. We'll discuss them again in a little bit, but to that end, something that we're going to be emphasizing that we haven't talked about before is how low prices have a depressing effect on the economy. And so there's going to be two main theses of this video, which is going to be command economy is bad for a variety of reasons. One of those reasons is that it depresses prices, and also that depressed prices are bad for the economy at large. And so what we are going to be doing is we're going to be first talking about prices and the various effects, and also why low prices are bad. Then we're going to be talking about why command economy is bad, and then we're going to ask the children to leave the room, because that was the PG stuff, and I'll ask you to ask the children to leave the room now. I'll give you a moment to lock them in the cupboard, because of course everyone knows what's coming next. After you lock the children in the cupboard, the next thing that comes is of course the spreadsheets. And so with the spreadsheet, we are going to be discussing a new spreadsheet in quite a bit of depth, and this is a spreadsheet that uses a lot of variables, as you can see, in order to take a look at and simulate an economy at the margins, just looking at the effects of ownership, where we have a baseline condition, and then we have various assumptions that are going to be made, and under those assumptions, what happens to the GDP relative to baseline, as well as marginal government income, marginal government income adjusted for price, because one of the things we're going to be looking at quite a bit is going to be price multipliers. This is going to be a lot to unpack. We're primarily going to be, most of the length of the video is going to be unpacking this, but if you do not want to watch a video for this length and you just want to hear the short version is don't go command economy. Command economy is bad. It's super trappy. The fact that you're getting a bunch of government dividends doesn't actually mean that you get more money in your balance with which to buy stuff and pay for stuff, with the exception of if you were going 100% military or something like this, and so you don't want to go command economy. And secondarily, all your prices being low is not an indication that you have a good, well-bolstered economy, something that's roaring like that loud car outside, and it is instead indicative that you have a depressed economy, and it is a bad sign, and we are going to be taking a look at those. Those are the two main points. If you just want the main points, there they are. And then now we get our hands dirty. So we need to clarify before we really kind of jump in on prices what we mean when we say we want prices to be expensive, which is that we do not want any individual good to be especially expensive. We want some goods to be more expensive than others. This has to do with equilibriums of efficiency. We'll talk a little bit about this later, but we do not want one singular good to be skyrocket high, 2 goods, 3 goods, 4 goods, 5 goods. Instead, we want the entire market, as long as we are producing the good rather than importing it, to be expensive. When only one thing is expensive, and to be fair, we have expensive fertilizer, but we have expensive explosives here, what this means to you as a player is this is generally a sign, unless the PM is really inefficient, expensive price is a sign that you have a really good opportunity for a profitable building. You should build explosives factories if you have an opportunity to build really profitable ones, and as you build them, this will increase the number of sell orders, which will in turn decrease the price as you increase sell orders, so you will be reducing the price, and so you will no longer have a high price. But as you build more explosives, you will be creating demand for other things into your economy. If we kind of zoom in here on Bosnia, you will notice that it has a bunch of inputs. So as we build more explosives, these input prices will rise, and so you will be trading off the high prices from one to the other. And also we have the weekly balance, some of which is getting paid out to the ownership class who are spending money on luxury clothes, the wages which are getting spent on the kind of lower tier clothes. This will raise the price of other things. And so it's in reducing the price of the explosives, we do not reduce the overall price level in our economy necessarily that much by building more explosives. Instead, we push or trade it over to increasing the price of other things, which is going to give us other opportunities to build profitable buildings. What we want is we would rather everything be at plus 20% rather than being at minus 20%. This is because buildings will always have a positive net value added. They can't have a negative net value added, otherwise they won't be able to employ, and if it's just barely positive, they won't be able to employ. And what this net value added is the price of all of the output goods multiplied by their quantities minus all of the input goods multiplied by their quantities. This is the net value added. This is how much a building adds to the GDP. And if we take a look at the sawmills here, we will see that there's a net value added of 1K. If we increase both the outputs and the inputs by 50%, we will increase the net value added by 50%. And so in this way, we will effectively have a building that is worth 50% more, even though we increased both the inputs and the outputs. Now, to be fair, some might have this objection, hey, that's all well and good, but don't you increase all of your government expenses by 50%? And the answer is, well, no. So first of all, there's a lot of different types of expenses. Some of these, for example, if you are paying out anything to a foreign country in the form of like bankrolls or any of this will not increase. But also, if we take a look at any government building, we will notice that there's two things that are getting paid out. The cost of all of the input goods might increase by 50% if everything's 50% more expensive in our economy, but the thing that will not increase is going to be wages. Wages will not increase by a same amount here, which, to be fair, technically lowers us as well, but if you're not increasing the wages, and these wages are a substantive portion of your government costs, which we see are fixed national expenses, 125K, we see construction goods only 100K. To be fair, we need to add more construction here, and so we will not be increasing all of these wages. We will be increasing the goods for military goods, but we will not be increasing in everything. And so in this way, when we extract money from the economy and we're extracting 50% more, because again, we're creating 50% more value added per building, this means we are going to get a positive benefit from this, in addition to us increasing the GDP, which is generally a metric of success, which has other effects like giving us more free minting. Although the free minting, I guess, would also be proportionate. Now, to illustrate this in another way, if we take a look at the construction tab here, we can look at the goods cost per construction. On wooden buildings, it's going to cost 1,000 input goods per construction. If we look at that 20% more expensive on price, we'll see that it's 1,200, and this makes sense, but the real wages cost per construction is going to remain constant. And so while our value that we can extract from the economy might be increasing by 50% when we increase all the prices by 50%, by the way, 50% is not a realistic target, it's just easy to illustrate, we will not be increasing our total cost by the same percentage because the wages remain constant. When we are saying that we want all our prices to be more expensive, what we're not saying is we want all of our prices to be plus 10% exactly or plus 20% exactly, and this is important to emphasize, which is what this section of the spreadsheet can help illustrate, where we are looking at price equilibriums and indifference thresholds, which those are some big words, but the main idea here is that there are varying PMs, and if we kind of come into the resources tab, depending on what you care about, an efficiency per week of construction, or efficiency per 100 workers, whatever is important to you, because if you run out of laborers, you care about the second one, you're going to have an output. And this output is going to be different for different buildings, and some buildings are more efficient than others. If you have a building that's more efficient than others, you should build more of that until it is not more efficient than the others. And so if we build more wood, if we build more chops, what will end up happening is the price of wood will decrease. So if we take a look here and we take a look at sawmills, we'll see efficiency per week of construction is 100. That's very strong for the early game, but if we decrease price a bit, and instead the output's only worth 1,000, we will decrease the efficiency per week of construction. At a certain level of prices relative to one another, you do not care what building you build. This is called an indifference threshold, and you would want prices to trend such that you would not care if you build atmospheric engine pump or you build sawmills. It's all the same because all the buildings will produce the exact same value, which means you've exhausted all your opportunities for buildings that are more profitable than one another. If you have a building that has a more profitable opportunity, you should build that, but that in turn will lower the price, and so what you will eventually achieve is a price equilibrium here. So kind of taking a look right here, if we see this as a price equilibrium for our theoretical economy. where we only have iron, wood, coal, tools, and steel. Notice that these feed into each other's PMs, and so they're going to affect each other's PMs because they're not just the outputs, but also the inputs. At this price level, the efficiency of each of these buildings is roughly speaking 57 for all of them, which means we don't really care which building we build of these 5, although there's like other considerations like how many people you're depeasanting is maybe a factor, this types of things. But beyond that, the point is that we do not want all of our prices to be plus 10%. Instead, we still want the prices of our more efficient industries to be cheaper and the ones of our less efficient industries to be more expensive, because an expensive price of something that is less efficient is less of a signal that you have an opportunity for a profitable building than if it is something that is more efficient. With that said, if we change the equilibrium price of these by just doubling them, let's say, which will, to be fair, give us prices that are not possible because you can't get over plus 75% price, the equilibrium efficiency of all of these will remain roughly equal or doubled, but the prices of all of them will go up. Let's just kind of illustrate that now. Let's go 76, and we're not going to get the math perfect on this, and this is kind of fine if we don't get it perfect. It's still going to illustrate the idea, but what we see is that, roughly speaking, the equilibrium efficiency here has doubled for all of these, and the price of all of these is way, way, way higher. This is what we mean when we say we would prefer higher prices. We would prefer higher prices. We are still sensitive to an equilibrium, but the equilibrium efficiency of all these buildings is the same. I suppose the equilibrium efficiency of softwood specifically is higher, so this should be the next building we build, but notice all the prices here are higher. And so they're higher, but with a sensitivity that PMs are more efficient than the others, and we would want them to be collectively higher, not looking to have one specific price be higher. If instead we just had, wood at 40, and that's our only high price, then obviously we build and spam wood. And so it's not the case that you want to push up the price of one singular thing, because this is an indication that you are overlooking opportunities for more profitable buildings. But when everything's expensive, all the buildings are going to be more profitable. So here you're missing, but if you have everything's way more expensive, then you won't be missing. There's an effect here that's worth mentioning as it relates to higher prices being useful that kind of dampens the effect of high prices being useful, which is that there is effectively a money deletion effect occurring whenever you have buy orders in excess of sell orders, or you have sell orders in excess of buy orders, which is that in order to increase price, you need to have more buy orders than sell orders. When you have more buy orders than sell orders, the value of the increased price is diminished by the fact that you have more things that are losing out by the high prices than things that are winning by the high prices. The winners that are winning by the high prices is obviously the logging camps here. The losers are everything that consume this, because when we look at the profitability of the furniture manufacturing, their balance is going to be decreased by the goods being more expensive, because it's the output goods minus the input goods. This is how you get the net value added, right? If we kind of just jump back into the browser real quick and we look at the PM, we are coming in here and we are, we are gaining on the sawmills by increasing the output. And then, similarly, we are losing in something like the tooling workshop by increasing the inputs, which is going to decrease the net. If we just increase the input, the net value added is going to drop by the same amount that we decreased. And so we are trading value from one spot to another in some sense. But if we kind of take a look, kind of jumping back, when you have high prices, what's going to end up happening is that when you have high prices, okay, every building is more efficient because your overall efficiency is increased. But if we take a look at wood again, with our high prices, we have more buy orders than sell orders. So that means more instances of the wood being used as an input are present in our economy than the wood being used as an output. This doesn't offset the effect that we are increasing the efficiency of every single PM, because PMs are just generally efficient. If we kind of jump into the browser yet again, a lot of the PMs, if we take the efficiency number, which is going to be, if we take a look here, where is the efficient? This is price flexibility is the efficiency number. This is achieved by dividing the output by the input. Most of these are efficient enough that this number is so high that the money deletion effect by having more having more buy orders than sell orders, such that you are having more instances of the price being expensive, making something less profitable, is offset by the fact that this number is so huge that just increasing the price of both of the things to increase the net is going to offset it, if that makes sense. It's a little bit convoluted, but I think it is worth mentioning that this is an effect as it relates to prices, is it's not pure value because of how prices work, because you need to have more buy orders than sell orders in order to achieve high prices. However, you do not have this negative effect in some instances, and that one instance is going to be kind of answering the question, well, how do we increase prices if this is what we want to do? And the main one that's going to be really nice is if we increase it through trade. So we see here we have cheap tools, and we see that we have trade routes. Trade routes will create buy orders in the market, but it is not going to be anything in our economy that is going to be rendered less efficient by the prices being high or higher. And so these trade routes will help us to increase the price without suffering this negative money deletion effect. We're not going to get too into this because this is less about trade. The secondary way that you increase prices is to increase government spending. So in Victoria 3, you have two economies. You have your national budget economy, and you also have your GDP economy. The GDP economy is kind of what we've been focused on a little bit here, which is the weekly balance plus the wages of every single building in your economy times 52, because this is an annualized figure rather than a weekly figure. And what it needs to be kind of noted here is that when you have a positive balance here, this means you're extracting money from the overall economy, or you're extracting money from specifically the portion of the economy that is consumer goods. So for example, you see here, there is not too much excess in the pops. They're really not going to upgrade that much in wealth level. But when they upgrade in wealth level, this means that the needs go up and they buy more of these things. This increases buy orders. And so if they cannot buy as many things, this would decrease buy orders. So when we take more money from our pops, we will reduce the buy orders for, let's say, clothes, and this will effectively reduce prices in our economy, and so this is a bad thing. However, so let's just kind of take a look at an example here. So currently, they are running a balance of 2.5% if we unpause, and the taxes plummet. Now we see it's a balance of 12%. There's a huge excess. We're now losing money, but they're going to upgrade in wealth, and as they upgrade in wealth levels over the course of, a few months, what will end up happening is that they will have more buy orders, and this will slowly raise the price of all of the consumer goods that they consume, amongst them being clothing, which will give you more opportunities for profitable buildings in the clothing sphere. However, this notably decreases the amount of balance we have. And so what you need to think about when you're thinking this through is whenever you're extracting money in terms of taxes and this sort of thing, whatever your national revenue is coming from, if it is extractive, it deletes buy orders from the economy and reduces prices. So running a positive balance is a bad thing when it comes to stimulating higher prices. Conversely, running a negative balance is a good thing when it comes to stimulating prices, and so this allows you to kick prices up. Now, the kind of one that we need to focus on a little bit here is minting, or this is going to be a standout thing, because minting is not taking anything away from pops. So it's not just the case that minting is useful because of this 217k, we're getting 40k from minting, and that's really nice. Minting is what's known as a free money modifier. We're not only getting the money from the minting and the Diplo pacts, we're not only getting this money for free, it is also stimulating prices up, because what we are doing is we are re-injecting money into the economy by adding construction. So we effectively, when we take in taxes, right, when we increase the taxes, we depress prices, but then when we re-add spending into the economy by adding a bunch of buy orders for construction goods, right, when we add all these buy orders, we are re-injecting the money into the economy, and we are no longer decreasing prices. We're in fact increasing prices. And if you take a look here, we have minting 40k, Diplo packs 40k, so we're plus 80k. To be fair, we shouldn't be running a positive balance like the way we are, but we're plus 80k here, which means we're injecting a ton of free money into the market, which is going to add buy orders. So that means that steel or iron is higher priced than it otherwise would be, because we've added more construction than we otherwise would be able to, which means all the iron mines are more profitable, and we get all the cascading positive effects of having higher prices in general. And so this is like really important to emphasize that you're re-injecting money, you're running a negative balance will add prices, and so it's not just you getting more money to spend, it's you also stimulating your economy to be bigger. And this is one of the reasons why we emphasize so much the value of free money modifiers like minting, where they are just giving you money for free, because it's so much more valuable than just 41k more in the balance. Like increasing taxes to net another 41k is not anywhere near as valuable, right, as just getting the money for free, because it doesn't have the stimulating effect of the economy. When we go from low taxes to high taxes, we are not adding buy orders to the economy if our overall balance stays the same, because we add construction, but we lose all the buy orders that are created for all the consumer goods as the SOL of our POPs drop and their buy baskets are smaller and they don't consume as many of these goods. And so this is one of the reasons why kind of 2 episodes ago, when we are really emphasizing how good laissez-faire is, and we are placing a great emphasis on this investment pool contribution efficiency, this is why this is so important, because not only is it free money, it's free money that makes the rest of your economy more profitable, because it increases the price of everything in your economy, which has a positive effect even though the government has to pay more for all your goods. Now, this is without even considering the kind of normal metagame, which is for you as the player. You kind of often want to go companies that are construction oriented or with the construction goods. And so if you increase prices, but kind of jumping back into the browser, I said, if you increase prices, but your equilibrium is one in which you have a company with a construction bonus, like an iron company here, then this means that on iron frame buildings, you will tolerate an equilibrium with a much lower price. And we're not going to get too into this, but this means that the negative effect from increased government costs, from increasing the prices, when you increase the entire equilibrium, is much smaller if you have a company that's oriented towards construction goods. This is kind of a topic for like a bit of another video, but the important thing to emphasize is, as we are kind of drawing into talking about command economy, the reason we hate command economy is because it has a bunch of negative money modifiers that delete money from the economy. So even though you're, in theory, extracting more money from the economy, you don't actually extract any more money from the economy. Instead, you actually have less control over funds when you go command economy. Now, just to talk about the 2 primary malices that are deleting money real quick with command economy, we first have the throughput malice, and this is applying to everything that is nationally owned. In theory, you can go command economy, but then decide to have everything privately owned, but then there's really no point. But kind of taking a look at this, with the nationally owned buildings, proportionate to the amount of nationally owned buildings, you will get a minus 50% penalty that scales linearly, and this will be applied to your economies of scale throughput bonus. So we should be receiving a 14 bonus because we have a level 14 building, but instead we are trending towards a 7% economies of scale bonus because it is getting cut in half. Now, to kind of illustrate what exactly this means, the max economies of scale throughput bonus you can possibly have is 50%. So if we were on 50% on a building, and we, had this at 1800 and 300 because we're adding 50%, we would see we would have a net value added of 1500. If we instead of adding 50% added 25%, we would be getting 1500 and 250, and we would see that we are gaining half as much as we otherwise would be, which effectively shrinks your economy by a very large margin. Now, there's a lot of buildings that will not be owned up to level 50, especially the resource industries, because not a lot of them will have 50 capacity. So this malice is considerably smaller the smaller your economy is and less throughput you have. But by the time you can go command economy, you are now fairly late in the game, and you actually probably have a pretty big economy. So by the time you can even go command economy, which, vroom vroom, maybe you go a little bit faster, but by the time you get central planning, you probably have 50 size buildings, especially in a lot of your manufactories. And so getting cut down in terms of a proportion of your economy by 1/6 if you don't have other throughput bonuses, or something like 1/8 or 1/10, this is really substantive malice. But the second one we want to talk about is for the government dividends, because for every dollar that goes in the government dividends, this is exactly a free money malice. For every dollar that goes into government dividends, half of this is getting annihilated under interventionism right now. Command economy receives a better bonus. They do not annihilate as much money, but they're still annihilating money. If we kind of take a look at the laws, which our laws are inverted because we're sad, we see that we have a government dividends efficiency of plus 40% on top of the flat one of 25%, so we'd have 65%. There are some laws that will improve it slightly, like modern financial instruments and this sort of stuff, but the idea is that you are going to be receiving some penalties no matter what you do. So there's the other government dividends efficiency for a max of 75%, but that still means 25% of the money will just be hard annihilated. And so this means that we have, since we in Bosnia here, we are in interventionism, we have a 50% contribution. The government dividends, half of this balance is going to government dividends, and of that, half is getting annihilated. So this means the 1.5k, this is getting deleted, which of course means we are receiving less money in the treasury. But not only are we receiving less money in the treasury, we're just kind of assuming this sort of balance where we are having a neutral balance in our economy. And when we're making literal zero in terms of our total balance here, we will be injecting less money into the economy the more money deletion we have, which means there's going to be less buy orders, which will depress prices, which will further hurt the economy. So all of that brings us to this, which I hope your children aren't seeing. I hope they're still in the cupboard, because this is not okay. But this is the new sheet we have kind of cooked up, and the entire aim of this sheet is going to be calculating what happens to the economy when you go these various economic systems using as many variables as possible. So this is the most complicated sheet we've ever done in terms of just the raw numbers of variables we are looking at in order to put in the calculation. So a bit of a few caveats here is, one, I might have made an error somewhere in here. And I don't know if I made an error. The numbers that got spat out are definitely the numbers that comport with my theories and understandings of the relationships that are going on, but they still might be a little off. Two, we are calculating price into this because this is very much the point of this video, because we know that price will have a depressing effect, a decrease in price will have a depressing effect, and an increase in price will have a stimulating effect in terms of the overall price of your market. We are not looking at a basket of goods, but instead just a disembodied aggregated market that has a GDP of 400. And so one of the problems with price is the things that we use to inform price are looking at the total amount of money created or destroyed. We will kind of circle back to a lot of these factors, but the total amount of money created or destroyed will effectively change when we have a price change, and there will be a feedback effect. As far as I can tell, the feedback effect is not calculated because we do not want to do iterative calculations. There's not calculus in this in order to find a closer number, and so these numbers are not going to be exactly what you would achieve with this economy of a size of 400. 400 what? We don't know. Kittens, maybe. Ducats, probably. Pounds, actually. And so this is another thing. Another thing that we won't go into too much is spendable debt. There are some problems with the calculation of this. I guess we'll talk a little bit more when we talk about debt itself, but there's a very substantive difference, because another thing to note about command economy is that you cannot run debt in command economy. It is just completely bad, because proportionate to the percentage of buildings that are government owned, which under command economy we're assuming is 100% government ownership, whatever amount of debt you have, that will apply an exact percent malus to your government dividends efficiency. So if the bar is 50% filled up, that means you will get a 50% government dividends efficiency malus, so our government dividends efficiency will be reduced to 25%. This means you cannot debt spend under command economy, and one of the big substantive things here is that deficit spending allows you to spend more money, which allows you to inject money into the economy, which has a stimulating effect of not only you are getting more money from your national revenue, or in terms of your spending more money, not only is this happening, but you are also pushing up prices as you do it, and so it is going to have a stimulating effect. And so one of the problems is that the way you would calculate how much debt you would need in order to stay on the exact percentage of debt as you increase the size of the GDP, we don't have that done. And that would be really complicated to do. or it is at least beyond my ability to put into a spreadsheet at this point in time. But when we'll talk about it, we'll unpack what numbers we have used and this sort of thing. All right, let's start with looking at our 4 conditions, as well as some underlying assumptions that we have in the conditions. We're going to explain these as well, but we have a laissez-faire biased condition. We have what I think is a reasonable scenario, but I haven't done like a huge sample size of looking at a bunch of games and looking at what is the case. This just kind of looks like a reasonable thing to me. And then we have a command economy biased scenario, and then we have a 100% government ownership scenario, which is not really possible for anything other than command economy unless you have just nationalized everything. However, I think it is very useful for driving home the point, just like how that guy's driving home very loudly, how bad command economy is, because in theory, command economy should crush if government ownership is good, or if they should crush this category more or less, and it really fails to do so. And so because of that, this is going to be looking very good. So we also have this baseline condition here. Our baseline assumption is a GDP of 400 and a split between dividends of 200 and also a split between wages of 200. So just kind of coming back into the browser here, if we have a logging camp, we're assuming that the 6.4K balance and this wages will be equal for the entire economy in the aggregate. We're also just kind of assuming the entire economy in the aggregate. We're not looking at prices of individual goods. We've abstracted that out. We are just looking at prices as a whole as they relate to base prices. We're still assuming that there's going to be equilibriums going on, but we are just, for the sake of not calculating every single good, because that would be way too much, we're just assuming kind of an aggregated market price. But coming into looking at the laissez-faire bias condition, we're assuming you're on publicly traded. This swaps over the ownership, 1/6 of the ownership on financial districts from shopkeepers to capitalists, which is going to be favorable. We're assuming that there are 100% financial districts, which I think is theoretically possible, but practically speaking, I don't think this is going to be the case. That comes up too often. I believe there is a contribution floor for financial districts, but I don't think there is one for manor houses, so I don't know how off achievable this is. This is something I have to pay attention to more moving forward. We're assuming central planning and modern financial instruments. These are both benefits to command economy, but I think that it's worth throwing them in. But when we come to the government dividends efficiency perspective, we will see that the numbers that we have slotted in are fitting with having all of the tech, and so we will have maximized government dividends efficiency. And you can see under the condition where we are going to have 100% financial district ownership, the command economy, we will be assuming that command economy always has full government ownership, and so you can see here the dividends that are getting paid out under command economy. We will also be assuming happy and powerful capitalists, which will not always be the case. And then we are going to be assuming very high graduated taxes, which is very important point to make here, is that command economy looks better the worse your kind of tax system is, and graduated taxation really allows you to peel a lot of taxes off of dividends. And so you can collect a lot of taxes from the portion of the economy, kind of just coming back in here, from the portion of the economy that is the weekly balance right here. You can collect a lot of money when you are on a more progressive tax system. Just keep in mind our laws are inverted because we hate making videos where people are not confused. But if we look at our taxation, you can see consumption-based taxes. Normally it's at the top. Here it's inverted. This is going to be very regressive. As we kind of spin up, graduated taxation allows us to peel the very most out of the dividends. If we're on per capita taxation, this is regressive relative to proportional taxation or graduated taxation, and we're not going to be able to take as much money or as big a chunk of the money out from underneath the weekly balance. And so this will be, for command economy, and in theory would be better, a lot better if you were on something like per capita or, any other type of like really low tax system. Command economy would look a lot better. However, by the time you can go command economy, you can also go graduated taxation. So this is like, you can't go command economy super early in here. Another thing to note is that in command economy, you can run low taxes and not have it affect your government income anywhere near as much. And so this is going to be something that we are looking at when we are looking at the spreadsheet. But just kind of cruising through more, we are assuming that there is a 50-50 wage dividend split. We will be assuming that for all of the conditions, that there is a 50-50 wage dividend split, where half of the stuff is dividends, half of the stuff is wages. This makes a difference that is very slight in that a larger percentage of the government or of the national GDP that is being contributed to dividends, the more effect you will get that is moved in terms of price. But for everything else, it's going to just move stuff proportionally, and so command economy benefits more when the dividends are really small, or command economy looks better when the dividends are really small, because it turns out government dividends are just bad, and so it looks better. We're assuming 50-50. The differences between these, that insofar as they favor economic systems other than command economy, would look better if you had larger percentage dividends, and they would look worse or not as substantive if you had smaller dividends. Finally, we have this reasonable scenario. Oh, also, very important here, we have assumptions about what the throughput in the economy looks like. Average throughput, the higher this is, the more substantive the throughput malus is. We are assuming an average throughput of 50. This isn't really possible on resources, but it's possible for all the industries, and a higher percentage of your economy that's industries, the more it'll trend towards this. It's possible in resources in some spots, and you can see here the average throughput for command economy is 25. And this is because they have 100% government ownership. We're assuming average EOS every place as being, average building level everywhere being 50, and this informs the EOS. We are also assuming some levels of non-economies of scale throughput, such as getting companies, getting a happy bonus from like the agrarian guys, getting state bonuses, getting a happy bonus from the trade unions. A bunch of stuff can give you an economies of scale throughput bonus. The more economies of scale, the more throughput bonuses you have from not economies of scale. So kind of if we just come back into game real quick, the more you have that are not from economies of scale. So if we take a look here, we are using, in fact, where is our... I thought we were using an edict here. Okay, Bosnia, we have the happy trade unionists. So this is an example of one. The more of these bonuses that you have, the less substantive an effect it will be to have the malus. And so command economy, if you have very small throughput bonuses and very large non-throughput bonuses, will look relatively better or relatively not as bad. It's really just relatively not as bad. And so that's kind of the next thing. We are going to be looking at... so the throughput is also going to be an important one. So let's take a look at the reasonable scenario. We are going to have 75% financial district ownership, where 25% is going to be owned by the agrarian stuff. We are going to have 20% government ownership. So of the stuff that is not gov owned, 75% will be financial district, 25% will be agrarian. We will have a 35 economies of scale average to represent that you are probably building buildings up to 50, but at the same time, you're going to have resource industries and you're going to have some not at 50. We're assuming 20% government ownership. Very important to emphasize, this is kind of not really reasonable for laissez-faire. Laissez-faire, you will not have this high percentage of government ownership, and so laissez-faire will look a little bit more like this condition, but we're just doing this because all the other systems can look like that, and so we're just kind of doing it across the board where we're having that level of ownership. We are assuming 10% non-economies of scale throughput on average, and we are assuming high proportional taxation. So not very high graduated taxation, high proportional taxation. Graduated taxation will look better, and we do have this note in here, the public ownership is unreasonably high for laissez-faire, but that's fine. For command economy, we are assuming 75% financial district again. I think this will be this, I think you will have most of your contribution be financial district by this portion of the game. We are assuming a 20 economies of scale average. So taking a look here, non-EOS throughput is going to be 20, and the average building size is also going to be 20. This would not ever happen in a game where you're getting just as much throughput, not from economies of scale as you are in other things, but again, this is command economy bias. We're assuming 40% government ownership for most things, but not for specifically command economy, where we're assuming 100%. We have 20 non-EOS throughput, low proportional taxation. So as you lower taxes, this will decrease your income on most of the systems, but since most of your income on command economy is coming from government dividends, it doesn't decrease it. So in a sense, command economy allows you to go low taxes a little bit better, but this is assuming low taxes, and this is really why in this kind of category, command economy really shines. And then we also have public ownership unreasonably high, just in general. And then we have the condition where there's 100% government ownership, again, not really possible. And these are kind of all of the conditions that we have off to the left here. All right, so what we're going to do now is we are going to go from left to right, talk about these categories and the various relationships that are kind of associated with them. You may have noticed the numbers have changed. We noticed an error in the spreadsheet. We have rectified that error, and it makes command economy look even worse than it did before. We have recorded quite a bit, but now we're back where we are. Started at the bottom, now we're back at the bottom, and so we're going to kind of get into it. Real GDP is calculating your GDP after adjustments made from the average price multiplier is going to be the primary thrust of what's going on here. This average price multiplier is taken from considering a variety of free money modifiers. We have the private free money modifier, so this is going to be investment pool contribution efficiency. We have a national money deletion, which is going to be from government dividends. We have nationally owned debt malice, where we are assuming under some conditions, if you are deficit spending, that you have some debt, and this is going to be a very, very small figure, but this is going to delete money as well. And then we have, as a positive modifier, spendable debt. We'll talk about that more when we get over to it, but we will notice the GDP varies quite a bit, and this is often a metric people use for success, and so it's just kind of a vanity figure to some degree, in the sense that with the exact same number of buildings under laissez-faire, you will have a much higher GDP, but you still have the same number of buildings, and the GDP is kind of a reflection of the amount of buildings and economic activity you have, but to be fair, the value of the economic activity under command economy is going to be lower. Next up, we have marginal government income, which is going to be the amount of income that is going to the government that the government can spend. Now, this is kind of split into two different types. It is going to be split into money you can spend on anything you would like, and money that you must spend on construction. An advantage that command economy does have over the other systems is that money will always be anything income, and so maybe some theoretical sense command economy timing where you nationalize everything, which in order to, in multiplayer, spend way more on the military could possibly make some sense in some sort of weird scenario, but you'll notice you're really not getting that much control of anything, more control of anything income, and the overall marginal government income, under the really favorable condition for laissez-faire, which again is not that reasonable, it's like 3x command economy. And often, your very biggest expense is going to be the car, and so that's why you should buy something that is quiet rather than something that's loud outside. But because construction is one of your biggest incomes, you don't really care that money has to be dedicated to construction all that much. And so this is kind of, it's effectively 3x this. Now, under a reasonable scenario, okay, it's nearly double. And so it often can feel like, hey, we're making a lot more money under command economy, or just like looking at it, we're like, hey, we get to get all this juicy dividends. But because we are applying all the penalties, all these dividends going to the us, it doesn't really actually amount to a lot. And kind of to understand why we don't really mind the money going to capitalists, we kind of need to scroll to the right, I think, a little bit, and really kind of take a bit of a close look at these things, which if we scroll to the right here, we can see that, hey, we have these government dividends before a price adjustment and after a price adjustment. And you might be thinking, but generalist, what do you mean? In the base condition, we had 200 government dividends. How is it got down all the way to 70? What is this going on, my guy? What is this insanity? And so, what's going on is that, first of all, we have this throughput penalty. right? This throughput penalty is, instead of our average building level is 50, which means that in the baseline condition, we have 150% of a building per building. And so when we reduce this to 25, we will be reducing by 1/6 the total economic activity of what's going on in our entire economy because, 1/6 of 150 is 125, 5/6 of it. So we will multiply that by the pre-price GDP, and we are keeping wages relatively constant. And so what this means is that the GDP has been reduced to 333, and so it eats entirely into the dividends. So kind of just coming back into the system, in order to, whenever you think about a change in terms of efficiency, it will always eat into the balance because wages stay relatively constant. So an increase in money gained, or an increase in value produced will almost always go positively to the balance, and a decrease will almost always eat into the balance. And so what this means is that this decreases the share of the money that is going to dividends, which is how we are paid out under command economy. Now, again, this spreadsheet is not including income tax on kind of the lower strata, but if we take a look further, it's like, okay, well, why aren't we receiving 133? Well, this is further then multiplied by the fact that we have a dividend efficiency of 75%. Right, so 133 multiplied by 75%, 1/4, will give us 100. And then, further than that, we will be, the government dividends will be also further decreased by the fact that we have a shrunken economy beyond this 333. Our economy will be shrunk even more by the price multiplier, because this 333 is not taking into account the average price multiplier, because if we take a look at the resources, and I know we've done this several times, but I think it's worth mentioning, if we decrease the prices of both the inputs and the outputs by 50%, we will decrease the net value added by 50%. And so what we are seeing is a 7% decrease in inputs and outputs in terms of evaluating this thing. And so this further decreases it such that our government dividends, we started with like a baseline dividends of 200 that ends up being that the amount that actually reaches the treasury is 70 under this condition. Now, again, this condition is highly favorable to laissez-faire, and if we look at kind of the more reasonable condition, we'll see that they will be receiving 80. But when we think about, okay, taxes are something that we really like, right? Or how much are we going to be receiving in taxes from the grubby capitalists? When we are on a 30% dividend tax rate, we will be receiving 76% of capital taxes, or 76 ducats in taxes, which is actually more than the government dividends. And this is going to be money that you can use. Now, again, the more reasonable condition, we have 31 in here. To be fair, this 31 should be higher because 20% government ownership, you are not going to have that under laissez-faire. You're going to have a much higher figure, and so you could increase this by about 1/4 if you wanted to like 37. But then you notice, okay, this is a figure where we are going to actually achieve a lot more control when we are, and by control, I mean we will have more of this anything income instead of, it'll be close to 60 for laissez-faire. But on top of the anything income, we have nothing free for construction under command economy, and 92 free, or 92 specifically dedicated for construction under laissez-faire. And this is kind of, these relationships are like really, really substantive when they all get kind of layered on top of each other simultaneously. You'll notice, though, we are receiving more marginal income other than just the taxes, and we have a whole bunch of different slew of things that are going into the marginal government income. Okay, some of these are going to be included under construction-only stuff, and we'll just take a quick look at some of these things that are over off to the right. We are going to have, and another thing to emphasize here, the base tax collected before the price adjustment is 60. After you adjust for the price increase, it's 76, collecting off of dividends. But we're also collecting government reinvestment if there is government ownership. Again, the first condition doesn't have any. And we are also collecting, on top of this, a investment pool contribution. Now, the investment pool contribution, I think we have it over here. It consists of two different types: investment pool, just base, and free money investment pool. And so this is also going to be a substantive figure that is calculated in, and 87 is a whole lot. So kind of taking a look over here, back over here, we will have dividends not paid. This can be an indication of how much economy is going to the people, or how much of it marginally is going to the people on top of kind of the 200 base income that people are receiving. But it is very important to note, this also replaced a column that we had before that I didn't think was as good as this. It is important to note that this money is all going to be distributed to upper strata for all of these, and it is going to be distributed to lower and middle strata under these much more equitably. So this is going to very much positively affect SOL way more. Now, I'm not 100% sure. I think it might be the case that if we control for price, these dividends not yet paid will be like very the same under interventionism or laissez-faire, but we haven't done that. And then, okay, so this is where we are with kind of the main figures that we're looking at and what we're caring about. Now, in terms of kind of the overall relationships, you will notice that laissez-faire crushes command economy in every single scenario. There is no scenario where laissez-faire is better or is worse than command economy. Even the command economy favorable scenario, laissez-faire is still better by quite a big margin. Now, to be fair, the command economy favorable scenario, command economy, you will actually be receiving, or sorry, this figure here is going to be this figure divided by the average price multiplier, because you may be receiving this amount of nominal government income, but you're paying for stuff that's more expensive, and so we're dividing it by the price multiplier. Now, to be fair, with government income, a lot of that is wages. This figure would actually be better if we had to split between wages and goods, because it is only the goods that are getting more expensive here, not the wages as well. Wages are a huge portion of your government expenses. If we come in here and we look at what we're paying, you see 56K for government wages. These aren't getting more expensive because prices have gotten more expensive. We see that construction goods, those are getting more expensive because prices have got more expensive. But for the sake of simplicity and not just having an overwhelmingly complex spreadsheet, we have kind of omitted that, and we have this price-adjusted marginal government income. When we take a look at this, because this adjustment does favor command economy, even with this adjustment, laissez-faire under every single condition, including the one that's biased to command economy, is going to be beating the command economy in terms of how much money you're generating. The command economy one, though, notably, as we were about to say earlier, does beat out every other system other than laissez-faire if you are on a command economy biased sort of situation, or if you are on a 100% government ownership sort of situation that's less command economy biased. But this is kind of the super swing in terms of the overall conclusion and just looking at the thing, and it's so much worse after we have included the price adjustment from wages. What we had done is we had been adjusting just the dividends portion of the economy, the amount that had been going to dividends, as it related to price. But remember, if we kind of come back in here, whenever you increase the overall economy of the building, you're not increasing the wages, you're only increasing the dividends portion. And what we needed to do, the spreadsheet was doing before, the error that we fixed, is it was effectively increasing wages by the price, and we can't do that. We need to increase the amount that we would have increased the price of the wages. We need to instead move that to the balance, and when we do that, this is the adjustment we get. We get that this is going to be 200, which is kind of the base dividends level, or the base wages level, which we're trying to keep relatively constant. We multiply that by the average price, and then we minus 200 from that. So if the price is over 100%, this will be a positive number. If it's under 100%, it'll be a negative number. So if it's negative, this will eat into the dividends that would otherwise be helping to go to government income. And if it's positive, this will instead add to the dividends. And just kind of take a look at this column here, and we're just going to show just how robust an effect this is when this is just the price accounting for half of what's going on, right? This is just the adjustment you're making for wages, not the portion you're making for dividends. And so it's roughly speaking half of the adjustment, but we're taking a look at price adjusted marginal income. We're going to delete this entire column, and when we do, you will be able to see an enormous jump. Laissez-faire on kind of the reasonable scenario and command economy are 136 and 87 respectively, and then they move to 129 and 100 respectively. And this is a huge difference in terms of price adjusted marginal income, and this is about half of the difference that you're achieving overall, because this is just the effect that you're getting from wages. And I'm saying this because I really want to drive home just how big an effect these prices is. We are still, when we are we're still controlling for the fact that everything's going to be more expensive in the prices here. We're still controlling for that fact, and even when we do that, we're still seeing an enormous robust effect from the overall prices being higher. This is something that's generally speaking kind of really hard to explain to people, and this is probably the thing that people disagree with me on most, is that they're like, no, prices should be low. No, they shouldn't be low. They should be high, because this increases the value you're getting out of every single building when you're getting value out of buildings. And this is really, really substantive. And I think that this is the adjustment we made to the spreadsheet. It was much stronger effect than I thought it was going to be, and it really drives home just the importance of prices. Here we have real dividends, which are going to be the dividends after we account for a variety of things, not yet including price. And you will notice the final figure that we have on the end of this is going to be that we are accounting for the fact that we are adding this to the figure, because this is moving from an amount that would have been going to wages to instead dividends. And partially highlighting this is also the dividend GDP percentage split. This is based on a variety of factors, but this is taking the real GDP, or is dividing the real dividends by the real GDP, and we're getting this figure here. And you will notice a much higher share of the dividends, or of the balance of the building, is going to be going to the dividends, kind of coming back into, we can think of this chop, right? And for this, if we're on command economy, instead of being 50-50, it would be 70, except for the wages would have remained constant. And so that it's like a demonstration of just how big a difference it is. And if we're on command economy, if we're on laissez-faire, under the laissez-faire favorable condition, it's like closer to 60%. Just kind of jumping back into the spreadsheet to be able to see. Actually, we shouldn't even be like, this is not a scenario that's going to be that easy to achieve, but this 54% versus 35%, the entire difference in percent is basically accounted not for higher wages, but by more government dividends. A lot of these other ones can be kind of self-explanatory, or we've already talked about them. Investment pool is going to be the amount of money that is going straight into the investment pool. For this, we have largely used this spreadsheet over here that we have another video on, so we will not go into this in too great of depth, but we kind of plugged in over here. Important to note is going to be the free money modifier, because this comes into the table more later when it is coming time to create money, because this is going to push up prices. So it's not just more government. It's so important to emphasize this. It's not just that we're receiving more government income that makes this great. It's that we're receiving more government income, but it's not coming from, it's not coming from a capitalist somewhere. It's not coming from a dividend that's not been paid. And instead, I'm not sure this number should be negative, but okay, it's also not in a very important column. And nothing leans on this column. This column's just like an output column. But as I was saying, it's not just that you are taking money from someone. It's just appearing out of nowhere, and so it can push up prices. We have average throughput, which is going to be the throughput after modifiers have been applied. You will notice for command economy, it is 25. Under the kind of normalish condition where we are having an average building level of 35, you will see the economies of scale bonus gets cut in half under command economy, and it will get reduced. And for the other buildings, it will also get cut down from 35 a little bit, because we're assuming a certain level of government ownership. Again, under laissez-faire, you would not reach 20% government ownership, but we're still just assuming it for the sake of the spreadsheet. And then you will get kind of this average throughput level that is much more favorable for command economy, and it is extremely disgustingly favorable in the command economy biased one, in such a way that's just like, this isn't going to happen. But this is just, we're trying to show when command economy is like good, when it's good, it's bad. And so the truth hurts with this one. And so this is kind of what a lot of these are, just kind of plugging into that. And also, this feeds into here quite strongly, because this is going to shrink. We see a bunch of calculations in here. What this is doing is this is shrinking the economy according to the throughput in order to get a pre-price adjusted GDP before we have made any adjustments here. And from that, we are also assuming wages are constant, so we get pre-price dividends as well, which we will eventually kind of manipulate past the prices in order to get real dividends. We feed out to get this real GDP by multiplying the price multiplier, and then we use this to get real dividends, and then with the real dividends we multiply it again by a bunch of stuff in order to feed out our marginal government income, but of which other stuff comes from. But continuing on here, and this is a pre-price, before we adjust for price, government income, which is calculated separately. That's why we have two columns for everything, by the way, because that way something isn't referencing itself, in which case it doesn't work anymore. And then we kind of have this category over here, which is a pretty important one. So we are using this total money created or destroyed kind of number in order to figure out what the average price multiplier is going to be, and this is kind of the heart of a big substantive push of what we're trying to illustrate here, because this is the hardest to illustrate thing. We've already talked about it quite a bit, but you can see up here, this is the equation that we're getting used, and we are taking the total pre-price GDP, adding the money created or destroyed, dividing this by the pre-price GDP, minusing this and then minusing 1 from this. So if it is over 1, we will get a positive effect, where this will raise the price. If it's under 1, we will be getting a negative effect. We have to multiply by 0.75, because when it is going to be exactly 2, or twice the buy orders of sell orders, we're going to have plus 75 price, and then we're adding 1 here, because we are representing it not as a minus 15% price, or plus, or a minus 9% price, plus 9% price, or minus 7% price. So instead we're just kind of the price multiplier, and the plus 1 adds 100%. And so this is what we get. If we took this away, the number would turn negative. For example, on this, it would be minus 7%, this would be 9%, and so on and so forth. And so this is really where we are getting the effects that we have illustrated so many times coming into the sawmills, changing the price of the sawmills. We don't need to do this again, but where we are increasing our overall output of all of our buildings when we are doing this, when we are getting free money like this, and at this amount, we are increasing the total price of or the total profitability of all the buildings in our economy by like 10%, in addition to getting this 49 free money, right? Now, again, this is something that we kind of want to emphasize. It's harder for you to create buy orders by exporting when your prices are already high, so there are some factors to consider with trade, but often you get big enough that these factors kind of fade away and you become kind of the global economy anyways, and it's not as substantive a thing, and this is a really huge deal. Now, the things that are going into this total money created or destroyed kind of factor that we have here are going to be, and I think we've talked about this a little bit already, but it is going to be this private money, free money modifier that we are receiving from investment pool contribution, specifically the free money modifier portion of it. So that you can see here, this is 27 and we have 26.99. I think there's a rounding that is occurring here. Yeah, they're both 26.99. I don't know why the other one's rounding and that one's not. We have the national money deletion, which is going to be the money that is getting deleted from the dividends malus. You see here, that's 33 in this section. That is because we are deleting down from having a dividend of 133, pre-price dividend, and then since we have a government dividends efficiency of 75%, minus or 0.75 times 133 is in fact 100, and so that is where we are getting that figure there for this 33, which is getting subtracted from the free money, which is why you're getting money destroyed. We have the nationally owned debt malus, which is really small, with kind of what we're talking about, and then we have this figure that is quite a bit to unpack. and I'm not 100% sure I did it right, but we're taking a look at spendable debt. So in order to understand spendable debt, we do have to take a brief look at credit. Now, credit is going to be informed by three things. First, there's a base level of credit that is incredibly small and you just never need to think about it again. There's also going to be credit that is informed by cash reserves. This is the primary source of credit, and also your GDP as well will go into figuring your line of credit. And so we can see here our current line of credit is up to 9.77 million here on kind of our country swap to the Netherlands. Of this, one will scale linearly with GDP, a portion of this will scale linearly with GDP, and a portion will not. Obviously, the part that scales with GDP scales linearly with this, but this will not scale up. If prices in your economy increase, this will always be 60K. If they decrease, this will always be 60K. So even though it correlates with GDP, it will not scale perfectly with GDP. It's because it's based on the number of buildings. But also, if wood suddenly becomes unprofitable, and this is how you go into a debt spiral when you go into default, then the cash reserves will drain down. Then you lose a credit limit. And so when you have a throughput penalty that's applied by going into default, it's much like passing command economy. It's really bad for your economy. And so what this is going to do is it's going to cause eventually these to burn down. Then your credit line decreases and you can even be gaining money, but simultaneously never digging out of a default because your line of credit is decreasing faster then your balance is increasing. And the idea that we're talking about when we talk about potential deficit spending or debt spending is that we are going to do the reverse of that, which is that if we are at a 15% of this bar filled and we spend in excess of our balance such that we're running a negative number, but we will end up on 15% next year because we increased the debt size by 15%, but we increased the GDP size by 15%, then you will never actually go into default ever. What this means is spendable debt is effectively an additional free money modifier that you can utilize unless you're command economy, because command economy blows. And so coming back into the spreadsheet, this is how we have tried to represent it. We have a GDP growth rate that we have assumed for our three conditions. I think 10% is a fair growth rate for a player, that this can be kind of easily achievable, and 5% growth rate is a little bit low. The lower the growth rate, the better, because what we are doing is we are spending based on that amount. And so whatever our kind of current spending is, we are multiplying. We have here, we are multiplying our pre-price government income by our GDP growth rate, and that is the amount extra we are choosing to spend on debt. Now, mathematically speaking, it is not a certainty that this is going to increase the GDP, or it's going to increase the debt limit by a commensurate amount. And in order to take a look at that, increasing that debt limit by the same percentage, we would have to do an enormous amount of calculations that include the price of construction goods, what construction PM you're on, the current price of a building, which buildings we're building, and all these types of things. That's way too many moving parts to fully calculate. But I am of the opinion that this is a relatively conservative estimate. I'm not 100% sure, but I think if you are spending the percent equal to your GDP growth rate, when you are not figuring in, there are sources of income we are not accounting for, like we are not accounting for wage income on any of workers, and we're not accounting for minting, we're not accounting for diplomatic pacts. And so I think that our income would be considerably larger, and so this would be considerably smaller relative to the size of our GDP or income. Once you accounted for all the sources of income, I think you can spend this additional amount extra and constantly stay out of default. Never mind the fact that you could trend towards default and actually increase your percentage incrementally in order to just grow your economy and just go towards 90% and then stay at 90%. So like you get free income for several years. Like let's say you start at 0%, then you go to 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%. You can get free income for years because the first 99% are free, and then when you default, you lose. And so this is how we have figured into this. We have chosen to do GDP growth rate because whatever you spend this year, the following year, your new budget will be able to cover what you spent last year in terms of the amount of spending. What we have also counted into this is interest cost, because you pay the interest back out of the POPs, and so interest cost is calculated into this marginal government income. It is subtracted from it. You just lose the interest back to the POPs, back to the shadow realm, and that actually might be the source of dividends not paid being slightly different on some of these. Now that I think about it, and this is how we are choosing to do it. Again, I just want to emphasize that we have not done the full calculation of if this spendable debt will eventually default to or not, but this is not something you can exclude. I think that this will actually trend towards you lowering your debt percentage per annum, but I'm not 100% sure on this. Either way, you would want it to be a factor. We're going to include the link to the spreadsheet down below. If you wanted to make a copy of this and delete the spendable debt, or make the spendable debt way smaller, in fact, we can just delete the spendable debt and take a look. So we have 136 versus 87, and if we deleted all the spendable debt, which again I don't think is correct because I think you have to include it, it was 130 something versus 87. You will see that even still, it's still considerably better for laissez-faire, and it's better under every single condition, but this one really drives home a couple of things, I think, which is one, spendable debt isn't just free income. It's a free money modifier. It helps to push up prices. It's like a driving force that makes your economy more stimulated, in addition to being additional income, which is something that this compound effect you don't really see in other kind of strategy games. Most of the time, your more money is just more money and you get to spend it, and hoorah, who cares? With this one, when you spend more money, it increases the value of all of your buildings. Now it increases it in an aggregated, or it's a cascading sort of way, because we're spending more on construction goods. This increases the price of construction goods. This means proportionally we build more construction good buildings in the economy, and that because our economy is now disproportionately construction goods, this actually increases the price of all the consumer goods. So everything gets raised in price eventually, kind of according to an equilibrium threshold that we've kind of discussed and we've talked about calculating, but this is going to be another further stimulating effect that is accessible to countries that are not going interventionism. Now, this gets worse when we assume higher percentages of government ownership, and also you are going to have to pay more interest. Well, we're also lowering the GDP growth rate, so we're lowering the amount that we're choosing to borrow here. So this is a substantive reason for the difference between these conditions that we kind of didn't talk about, but this is one that I think is really interesting. We might do a video on this sometime down the line where we fully calculate everything, but this is just a whole lot to kind of take a look at. And the rest of the stuff, I think we've already kind of covered to some degree. We have the interest rate is going to be slightly better for laissez-faire, but this is super marginal. The interest rate's very small. You can get it even smaller if you have a happy petite bourgeoisie. I don't think we assumed this. We just assumed the level of tech you would have, the interest rates, and that you were a GP. Interest rate's really bad if you're unrecognized, so you can kind of just delete this category if you're unrecognized. You don't want to deficit spend because the interest rate's too large, but this interest rate is just so marginal relative to the amount of money you're getting that it's just it's too good not to pass up if you're a GP. And especially if you're on laissez-faire. We have, the rest of it is just kind of guts of what is being calculated. We already talked about all of the forms of income that are calculated here at the end of the spreadsheet, and this is just to help kind of ease the calculation and is going to inform what's going on. You can see here, for example, 75% of the building here, 75% of the financial districts, 90% total, is going to be owned by not financial district. Oh, wait. This is 10% government ownership, and this is 20%. Let's change this. In any case, I still think 10% is not going to be achievable under laissez-faire, but this is actually just entirely a more reasonable figure. This figure does favor the other non-command economy things. So that is kind of the extent of the left to right here, talking through all the details. Again, huge emphasis for this video on the price multiplier and really pushing forward the value of money creation and or deletion. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the 100% government ownership condition, because I think that this is also just kind of illustrative or instructive, which is that command economy, even on the law where you are trying to go 100% ownership, it doesn't really outperform any other system that's reasonable by that much. Okay, it outperforms interventionism and agrarianism slightly. It still gets crushed by laissez-faire. And the real reason why is coming back to prices and free money modifiers. 100% of the government balance will go to the government dividends rather than government reinvestment. With laissez-faire, 100% goes to government reinvestment. Government reinvestment is not subjected to a malus, which dividend efficiency is getting applied to all the dividends where they're going to be multiplied. Command economy has far and away the best ratio, but it's still deleting a quarter of the cash that is in the balance. No money gets balanced when it goes to reinvestment. When it goes to reinvestment, it has to be spent on construction goods. It goes to the investment pool, which is all well and fine, but you're not deleting money. And so eventually, this will not be a government building, because you will buy it, you will have it as government building, you'll be paying out its value into the investment pool, and then once the investment pool kind of is fills up enough, they'll buy the building. And so this is also one of the reasons why you end up getting basically zero government ownership under laissez-faire, because everything is always put up for sale. Why interventionism is able to perform neck and neck with command economy is because even though you have a dividend efficiency of 60%, only half the money is going to dividends. Half of it goes to reinvestment. And so the total amount of money you're deleting from your economy is actually 20%, right? Because 50% goes to the dividends, and then of that 50%, 40% of it gets annihilated, so you have 20%. 25% of the cash is getting annihilated on our command economy, much like those tires are annihilating the road, and money is just getting deleted. And when money gets deleted, it's more than you just not getting it, and we're just kind of maybe beating the dead horse here. It's more than you just not getting it. It's that you are going to affect prices in a substantive way. You can, again, offset this with trade, but to some degree you might not be able to get the trade through, or you are, in that way, foregoing opportunities for other trade routes you could have run, stuff of this nature. You prefer high prices, and so you will be deleting money, not only not getting that money, but also pulling prices down. And you can see, even though you have no free money modifiers under laissez-faire, under this condition, under this 100% government ownership, you're not deleting any money. Under every other system, you're deleting a ton of money, and you see these really low minus 10% or more price conditions, minus 17% for industry ban. This is a really big deal. Also, a bit of an outlier throughout the spreadsheet is cooperative ownership. This has not really been the emphasis here, but cooperative ownership doesn't have government ownership or private ownership. All the buildings are owned by the people there. Way better for SOL, and it's just kind of a little bit of an aberration. There's a couple things I wanted to emphasize before we go, which is that there's a lot of things that are not included in this spreadsheet, because even though this is far and away the most variable dense spreadsheet we've ever done, Victoria 3 is a game where there's a lot of moving parts that are interconnected, and if you wanted to simulate them all simultaneously, we can actually do that. We have a program for that where you can simulate everything in Victoria 3 simultaneously. Here, hold up one second, I'll pull the program up. Okay, this is the program. As you can see, we are fully simulating Victoria 3. Okay, obviously I'm joking, but anytime you want to examine something, you have to pull it out in isolation and then examine it and then reinsert the ideas into the game. And so eventually it's just too much to do. Also, it just takes forever to construct these like models and like spreadsheets and this type of stuff. Like, it takes a very long time. And so, because you have to understand what relationship you're trying to account for. So I think that with all that said, the things that we are not covering, there's several things. One, we're not covering minting. Minting is going to be a factor. Minting is a free money modifier. It is influenced by GDP up to 200 million GDP, at which point it stops being influenced. This is the reason we didn't include minting, because minting is only a variable within a band of whether you're under 200 million or not. And so when minting is good, or when minting is possible, the fact that you're increasing the real GDP will become more valuable than it otherwise was. We are not including, as we have mentioned before, worse tax laws will make command economy look better. If you can't get on proportional taxation by the time you can get on command economy, I don't know what to tell you. And proportional taxation is just better. We do assume proportional taxation here. We assume graduated taxation here. Graduated taxation is going to be better for the non-command economy systems. And the worse your tax law is, the better it makes command economy work. We discussed a little bit that there's a money deletion effect from high prices, but it is not enough to offset the positive effect you get from high prices, but this is something to emphasize and keep in mind. We didn't discuss it too much. It's kind of a little bit of a complicated and abstract thing. We assumed here in this condition that we would have a baseline of half and half on dividends versus wages. I think that this is overall not a super important thing, but if you change the condition, things will change. We don't have it in the spreadsheet where you can just plug in a new number. We have 200 typed out in some places, so it's not just a plug and play thing. We probably should have had a baseline assumption in this type of thing, and maybe if we reconstruct the spreadsheet, we'll do it a little bit differently. But things will be better. You will exacerbate the differences as you increase dividends more. And so if dividends are a higher share of the economy, this will make laissez-faire look even better. And if they're a lower share of the economy, this will make command economy relatively not quite so bad. We've mentioned it several times, but trade can offset the negative effect from low prices. I think that this is not that it's a factor, and everything's kind of like a factor to some extent. I think that this might be more substantive in multiplayer than it would be in single player, because in single player, eventually you're running a very large percentage of the economy. And kind of maybe the biggest thing that we haven't really mentioned is if you depress the economy enough, such that the dividend is completely destroyed. So if we take a look here and we maybe swap onto, let's take a look at the building we've always been looking at, Bueller. If we take a look at this building, if we decrease prices so much or decrease throughput so much that this weekly balance goes to zero and we start eating into the wages, what will happen is the building will not be able to employ. It will fire pops down, decreasing sell orders until the price of these goods rises high enough that it can hit an equilibrium level of employment. We didn't talk about this whatsoever, but if you are experiencing any, and I mean any levels of unemployment as the result of having depressed prices from going command economy, this is catastrophically so much worse than everything we have already modeled. This is really, really, really bad, and you get this when you depress and lower all the prices. Used to see a lot of this kind of in the early days of Victoria 3 and like before patch 1.4, there was like a metagame, a super late game metagame where all the resources would get hyper expensive and you would eventually get huge, large-scale unemployment even if you had like 30,000 construction. There was no way to build through it. And a big portion of this was the fact that everything but the resources would eventually just like drop in price so much that the buildings just straight up wouldn't be profitable enough to employ, and you're more likely to hit that threshold at some point or another if you go command economy. And if you hit that threshold, I don't think there's a way to model it in the spreadsheet I have, but everything just collapses or starts collapsing, or the economic activity can't happen. You're just firing people off, and this is really, really bad. We didn't discuss it. So that's the video. I don't think we're going to have a summary. Actually, we are going to have a summary. Don't go command economy. Command economy is really bad. The topic of low prices being something that are good comes up a whole lot. This is probably the topic that I've had people argue with me most frequently on, is that they argue that low prices are good. I say that low prices are bad and that high prices are good, and it doesn't really go much of anywhere. I think that this video is kind of a more complete explanation as to why you like higher prices, and that this is the primary thrust of the video, perhaps. But secondarily, that is the last piece of the puzzle, the last nail in the coffin of command economy that we haven't really explained in depth in order to understand why command economy is not very good. And so hopefully we did that in a complete way here. This is, I think, the longest I have ever spent making a video, and I think this is by a large margin, because figuring out all the relationships we needed to put in here in order to make this spreadsheet work as it is working, which, to be fair, we're not even 100% sure is perfect, this took a long time. So if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe. This was a ton of effort. I don't expect it to do that well, but I expect for the regulars who are really interested in kind of the more sweaty versions of things and the advanced stuff, I assume that this will be an interesting sort of video. It was certainly interesting for me to produce it. I was expecting laissez-faire to look way better. I was not expecting it to look this much better. And so that was interesting from the perspective of making the video, because it just really smokes command economy, and it's like, it's not close. It's like not close. It's so much less close than we thought it would be. It's so not close that we are close to thinking of another verb or adjective other than close, and then we can't think of it because it's just not that close. And so it is what it is sometimes. But you know, other than that, yeah, the links down below, etc. Mostly etc. And have a good one. Don't go command economy.